right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Right up now, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Now.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Right About Now podcast. This is John Small. What'd you think about my new opening theme song? Got to give credit to my son, Elijah Small, for composing that. He's about to run off to college, so I am getting the most out of him that I possibly can before he jets off to the United Kingdom, where he'll be going to music school. Congratulations, Elijah. All right, question. Have you ever been called on to make a commencement address? Me neither. But what if you were? What if some college president called you one day and said, hey, we'd like you to show up at our school for graduation and make a speech? What would you say? What would your commencement speech include? Well, that's the question I posed to my guest today, Jason DeLand, who gave the commencement speech at his alma mater, Ithaca College, over the weekend. Now, given the climate on college campus these days, this was no small task, but I am told his address went off smashingly without a hitch and was a great success. That has not been the case for others this year, however. Well, for example, there was the speech given by the inspirational speaker Chris Pan in front of 70,000 people at Ohio State. You might have seen this. He encouraged them to get up and sing What's Going On.
I'd like to get started by moving our energy, getting our energy flowing. So if you're able to, please stand and follow my movement.
Wake up in the morning and
Let's take a deep breath, get real high, and I scream at the top of my lungs.
Later, Pan admitted to writing his speech while high on psychedelics. Then, of course, there's the one that everybody's talking about, KC Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker's controversial commencement address at Benedictine, in which he had a message for women.
Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
But look, not all speeches were cringeworthy this year. There was Jerry Seinfeld's pretty awesome speech at Duke, in which he encouraged students to not lose their sense of humor or their sense of privilege.
Privilege is a word that has taken quite a beating lately. Privilege today seems to be the worst thing you can have. I would like to take a moment to defend it. Again, a lot of you are thinking, I can't believe they invited this guy. Too late. I say, use your privilege. I grew up a Jewish boy from New York. That is a privilege if you want to be a comedian. Thanks.
Thankfully, Jason's speech was more in the Jerry Seinfeld camp of good, solid, even moving speeches. And I'm going to play a portion of it at the end of our interview. Jason DeLand is the co-founder of the advertising agency Anomaly, which is particularly known for its iconic Super Bowl ads for Budweiser, including the Best Buds ad, Lost Dog, and Puppy Love. Do you remember those ads where the puppy saves the Clydesdale horses? Those are his ads. He was voted as Adweek's 20 most influential people under 40. So on the pod, we talk, of course, about his commencement speech. And keep in mind, I interviewed him before he gave it, so you're hearing from pre-speech Jason. We also talk about his inspiring journey from an extremely impoverished childhood to college, where he played baseball and was a writer, to his successful career as an advertising executive. We talk about the role of mentors and great teachers in his life. We talk about his thoughts on what makes an ad truly great, how the advertising industry is changing in the age of social media, and we always end with the best writing advice he's ever received. So without further ado, I bring you Jason DeLand. Jason DeLand, welcome to the Right About Now podcast.
Great to be here.
Before we get into what you're doing now, I'd love to get into from whence you came and how you first got started in advertising and how you kind of broke into this world.
Sure. So I was very fortunate to find my way into the sort of the creative arts and advertising. I went to Ithaca College. So Ithaca College is the communication school there is called the Roy H. Park School of Communications. And it's one of the better communication schools in the country. I had wanted to get into the communication school, but they would not let me in out of high school. So luckily, I was a pretty good baseball player. And through a bit of cajoling of the faculty and my baseball coach, I finally convinced them to give it a shot. And I was admitted. And it's very, very difficult to get into the Park School as an inner transfer. So I did, and one of the professors there was this wonderful, warm, intelligent, incredibly gifted professor named Howard Kogan. So Howard Kogan himself had a very long career in advertising. He's probably the most famous for, outside of being a professor at Ithaca College, for creating the bumper sticker, t-shirt, and slogan, "Ithaca is gorgeous." So Howard and I, like sometimes just happens, we got along very, very well. And I remember a class I took with him, creative writing, was in the spring semester of my sophomore year. And so baseball is a spring sport. It's a fall and a spring sport, but the main part of it is in the spring. And I missed basically every class that semester. Always traveling, we'd go down to Florida, we'd take trips, all that sort of stuff. So he was a huge baseball fan. And at the end of the term, I handed in my final exam. And the only thing I do is I get a note back saying, "See me in my office." So I go into his office, and he's an intimidating guy because he has a huge reputation. And he sits me down and he says, "I have no way of knowing for sure if what you wrote is original."
This is before AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He said, "If it is original, I just want you to know that you have a very promising career as a writer."
That's a good teacher.
He said, "I cannot tell." He goes, I almost don't think I think you've copied this from somewhere. And then we had then a 45-minute conversation ensued. That became a lifelong friendship. He and I, we just bonded. He died not too long ago, and I wrote something for that. But Howard was the person who really saw the talent in me, although skeptical in the beginning, and really encouraged me and gave me, I think, quite a bit of confidence. And so it's no surprise that I end up back at Ithaca College 29 years later, giving the commencement address. And a lot of it has to do with Howard Kogan.
That's amazing. That's a good full circle story. Commencement speeches. So I have never given one. Congratulations. When you found out that you were going to be giving the commencement speech, how did you, what did you think? What did you, when you were excited, intimidated, did you get right to writing it? what was it? Take me through the range of emotions.
Well, the range of when President Cornish, Lejeune Cornish, called me, she called me on my cell phone, and I wasn't quite exactly sure how she got my number. And there was, she called me and she said, "Jason, we'd love to have you consider, put you in the running for the commencement address for this year." And I was like kind of shocked, actually, because Ithaca College has a lot of very established, credentialed, known alums. I'm thinking to myself, well, why not Kevin Connors? He's on ESPN every day, he's great. And I would love to hear what he has to say. Right. So she said, well, we want to bring, people like yourself back to campus and so on and so forth. And I said, yeah, I'd love to be placed in the running. And she's like, no, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. I want, if you say yes, then you're the commencement speaker. And so then I thought, I had to quickly move from, all right, I'm in the running, we'll see what happens here. At least I get time to think about it, to, okay, now you have to actually do it. The reason why I said yes is I have this very strong personal belief of paying things forward, right? I come from a very humble background. I think a lot of people do, but I've always said if I'm in a room of people, it's doubtful that anyone...
How humble was it? Explain humble.
I didn't have hot water in my house until I was about 10 years old.
Wow.
Right? So it's pretty...
Where was this?
Very rural upstate New York.
Okay.
So sandwiched between Syracuse and Binghamton, not too far away from Ithaca,
yeah.
An agrarian community.
Mm-hmm.
I lived on a road called Swamp Road.
Jeez.
So
there's your autobiography title. I grew up on Swamp Road. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And my father was a self-employed roofing contractor, and we just didn't have a lot of money. So, and that was great. I remember doing Christmas shopping at the Salvation Army, and so there's just the success that I have had in my life. I attribute to a lot of things that I learned when I was a kid around hard work and honesty and commitment and all of those things, because that was the only way that my family knew how to do much of anything. But, I've been extraordinarily fortunate. And every single time at Anomaly, when students come in, I don't care how busy I am. I don't care what's going on. I go and I talk to those students. And the reason why I talk to those students is because I'm still an idealist. And I remember being an idealist as a child, in college, and wanting something better for myself and the world and all of these great positive feelings. And part of my message is don't ever give up that idealism. Don't allow yourself to be jaded. And there are ways and prescriptions that I think you go about doing it. But I've always been a big believer in the only way to refill the well, that creative well, is to give back
to pay
something to it. And part of what I think I am reasonably aware of and therefore good at is how receptive kids, particularly kids, in college, can be to people who have achieved some measure of success in the field that they want to go and pursue. When those people take the time and give them something of value, something from their soul, from what they really believe in, with no pretense or bullshit, that's valuable. And so a lot of what my motivations for doing this is I now get to do that to an entire graduating class.
Take me back. I want to still stay with your childhood because it's interesting. Were you the first in your family to go to college?
Yes.
Okay.
I was the first of my family, my cousins, my everything.
And Ithaca is a private college, right? So
yes, it is.
So how were you able to kind of break out of that cycle?
It's all teachers, right? Like
right.
I believe in teachers and coaches deeply. So I'm dyslexic. I'm very dyslexic. So when I was younger, I was forced to go through a battery of psychological tests. The school that I was going to at the time made me go because they didn't understand why I was so disruptive and, seemed like I was kind of smart, but failed everything and all that sort of stuff. And the report came back and it said something I remember because I was home and my parents still had it, but it said something to the effect of, Jason is a very bright, young, energetic kid. He's dyslexic. He will do very well in life. Let him be. And that got me into a thing called Project Magic at Syracuse University, which was a gifted and talented program there. which I was very fortunate to be a part of. And then when I was in sixth grade, a teacher named Mrs. Frank, who I will probably get emotional talking about, she was dying of cancer. And rather than die alone, she decided to come out of retirement and be a teacher. And she was a really incredible woman on many levels. But one of the things that she did for me is she recognized something very similar to what Howard recognized and just worked her ass off to get it out of me. I remember, the kids making fun of me in school because we always had to read the newspaper out loud in sixth grade, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't read 5 sentences together, let alone an entire article.
Did you know you were dyslexic? Did you understand why?
No, not at that time. Not at that time. So I mean, this is great for all the teachers out there. Thank you who do this, who really do care. But every day after school, she would work with me, and we would code things, and she would teach me how to read. And I'll never forget, there was a big article about AT&T when it, during the Ma Bell sort of stuff and the breakups, and there was this big long article in the Wall Street Journal about it. It was like 2 pages long, and she called on me in class, and she said, "Jason, I want you to read the article from beginning to end." It took me 45 minutes. And the kids, I'll never forget, the kids were laughing and they were making fun of me, but I just kept going, and I just ignored, and I got to the end of it. And so, it's stuff like that where when someone bothers to look for something else in someone and sticks with them long enough to do it, to get it out of them, there's something very special in that. So I've always wanted to continue to do that. And I've been very fortunate, I think, to be around coaches and teachers at the right points in my life where, I could have gone right or left. And they were there for me.
They saw something in you, and so fortunate to have those mentors. But obviously they saw something with you, and you didn't take it for granted because they, appreciated it. Take me back to this commencement speech. So by the time this runs, you will have given this commencement speech. But talk to me about how you thought about what you were going to say, the process.
I think great writing is, it's kind of the Ernest Hemingway thing, like all you have to do is write one true sentence in something that right? So I started with one true sentence, and then I just wrote another one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. And it's as I wrote it very quickly. I wrote it in about a half an hour. But then, the protests on college campuses began to really crescendo. And there's been some canceled commencement speeches or canceled commencements.
Yep.
And I think there's this sort of narrative about colleges right now and about graduates and about college students that I had to, be at least cognizant of because I certainly did not want to, make the mistake of, writing an address that could be taken in a way that I did not mean it to be taken. I believe very deeply in free speech. I am as close to a free speech absolutist as I can think of. And I had a great politics professor at Ithaca who we talked a lot about this, but it's, if I think what you're saying is abhorrent and disgusting, wrong, misinformed, garbage, that's fine. I can think that, but I will defend to the death your right to say those things and think those things, because freedom of thought and expression is an antecedent to creativity. But I didn't want the speech to be seen as political in any way, shape, or form. And, I didn't, but I didn't have to change it because all of it was based on what I think is the right tone and tenor in today's context for someone in the life stage of graduating college, and tried to very much put myself in their shoes and go, what must I be thinking? What must they be thinking? How might they be feeling? Mm-hmm. How might they be thinking right or wrong? What are they actually going through? Has anyone bothered to sit down and really consider what they've been through over the last 4 years?
Right, with COVID and, all what's going on with politics and wars and there's been a lot.
And all the good stuff. Yep. As I say in the speech, you can view the world as through the lens of strife and struggle and adversity and inequity. Or you can view it as the most capable, most promising, most blessed world in human history. Right? Both can be true.
Right. You can have both.
I think when both are true, it's probably better, to lean towards the right side of that statement than the left side. But we'll see.
This episode of Right About Now is brought to you by AG1. And this is not just a plug here. I actually use and like this product quite a bit. I've partnered with AG1 because they make a really high quality product that I genuinely look forward to drinking every day. And you cannot say that for me and many health products. So take my word on this one. You will like the way this tastes and you will like the way it makes you feel. And it also makes the whole process of taking supplements a lot simpler. Like I just don't want to have bottles and bottles of different pills in my cabinets. I just take one scoop of AG1 in my smoothie every morning and boom, I'm good to go. I've got all the prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes that I need for my always grouchy gut. So look, take my word for it. Do I lie that much on this podcast? Not really. AG1 is definitely worth it. And I've got a special deal for my Right About Now listeners. You try AG1 and you will get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2, and also 5 free AG1 travel packs to take with you when you are on the road. All you have to do is go to drinkag1.com/rightaboutnow. That is drinkag1.com/right, WRITE, about now. All right, back to the show. What was the first sentence that you wrote that kind of felt true to you that made you feel like you wanted to write the next sentence and the next sentence?
Don't ever give up.
Okay. Because that was your experience.
My life philosophy is you just don't give up. You just don't.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you don't lose, but you just die trying. And in the reason why I think that's important, I think that's important in writing. I think people give up too easily, generally speaking.
I agree.
And they can give up for all the right reasons. I mean, my best friend in the world is a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. And we spend hours and hours and hours talking about, pretty awesome subjects. But he once said to me, he's like, Jay, have you ever heard of the idea of strategic quitting? And I go, yeah, I understand what you're going at, but you're talking to the wrong human. Like, that's not my.
Yeah, that's not your thing. Well, let me ask you about don't give up, because obviously fundamentally I agree with you. But a lot of times I meet people. Let me give an example. Like I have a friend, let's say I have a friend who has a dream of being an actor and has literally tried to be a working actor for almost 15, 20 years, has never really broke out, has kids, is now kind of struggling with kind of an adult, problems of not having enough money. And you would say to that person, never give up on your dream of being an actor. But like, at what point do you, I guess it's kind of strategic pivoting. Like, at what point do you say, well, maybe I don't give up on being an actor, but I might need to, like, so don't give up has some caveats, right? A little bit, or there's a way, like, you don't want to give up on your dream because that's too sad. My son who wants to be a musician, I would never tell him to give up on his dream, but I know he's in for a very, there's going to be ups and downs, right?
Well, I think so. I think it's an ellipse as opposed to a period. Like, I think there's like, you transition, you move on from, but you don't ever give up. And what I mean by that is, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. If you talk to me at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, that's what I was going to do. And I had opportunities to do that, but it didn't work out. I played my last baseball game last fall.
Oh, wow.
Competitively in a wooden bat league out here in Long Island.
That's cool.
And I am going to get my master's degree currently in sports psychology and human performance. And I have the good fortune right now of working with a young baseball player who is likely to have a very promising collegiate career. The other thing is I took the competitive fire of being an athlete in college and turned that into something, together with, the creative arts and created Anomaly, which is definitely considered to be one of the best agencies ever. So you kind of move on. I also am always, amazed. You could argue we're talking about writing here. You have to utter the words J.K. Rowling. And how many times her manuscript was just shut back in her face. I think it was 13 times, maybe at least a dozen, right?
Yep.
And she's arguably, she will go down in human history as one of the most prolific and celebrated writers ever.
Right.
So for every example of people who have tried and tried and tried and failed and then say, okay, I'm going to close the book on this thing, there are also examples of people who didn't, who went that one more go.
And got it.
And then I also have a theory about it, which is, we don't all have the same sets of capabilities. And we don't all have the same ability to learn. So some people may have to be told no 100 times before they've learned all the things that they need to learn to be really, truly gifted at something. And some people don't ever have to be told no. They're just gifted enough and have figured it out enough to be that great. But I have yet to see someone at the age of 70 or 80 who has ever said to me, I'm glad I gave up.
Right.
Now, maybe that person is out there and they're gonna email me after this.
If
and
anything,
say,
it's the
how wrong
opposite.
you
They
are.
say, I wish I hadn't given up, or I wish I had, done it differently. Right. At that point, it's usually that regret. It's not like, I wish I just gave up. Yeah, no, people don't think that way. So yeah, it's true. But I think it is great that you have a flexibility. Like you didn't become a professional baseball player, but you still play baseball. And like you said, you've channeled that competitive spirit into other things that you've been very successful at. So
Yeah, become, like I would tell your friend, become an acting coach.
yeah. Right.
Become a critic.
Yeah.
Become a writer. Become a director. Right? There's a thousand different ways to evolve something as opposed to just close the book on it.
Mm-hmm. I want to understand how you went from the kid at Ithaca who was a great writer and had a lot of promise to then getting into the advertising business, because, there's a lot of, like, I was also like actually it's not even true. I wasn't even really that strong a writer in college. I was trying to find my way in college of kind of what I was interested in, but there was definitely people telling me that I had some talent as a writer. Now, I ultimately sort of didn't even really choose it. Journalism sort of found me. But in your case, how did you find advertising?
It was serendipity, really. Howard Kogan was the one who pushed me there. Mm-hmm. He thought that would be the right thing for me. That's where he had come up, and I think he had wanted me to do that. Like I said, I was playing baseball, and I went to go see my coach about where I was going to play summer ball. So, listeners might know of the Cape Cod League. in Massachusetts, which is very famous summer baseball league for college athletes. And there's a couple more, but one is called the Great Alaskan League. It's out in Anchorage. And I wanted to go out there because I had a fascination with Alaska, and John Muir, who shows up in the commencement address. But I wanted to do that. I love fly fishing and I loved outdoors and all of this. And Coach Val said, Coach Valiceni, who's in the NCAA Hall of Fame, said to me, yeah, you're not going to Alaska. And I think he was basically like, if you go your junior year, you're definitely not coming back for your senior year, right?
Right.
He was smart. He knew. So I went out to go play in the Pacific Coast Collegiate League. And Ithaca College, the Park School, also had what is known as the LA program. And the LA program is a program where you go out to LA, you get an internship, et cetera, et cetera. And my wife now came into a bar that I was working in. She was also attending the LA program. And we weren't even dating at this time. And she was like, hey, have you heard about the internship at BBDO, which was a very large advertising agency? And I said, no, I had not. And she goes, it's a paid internship. I said, really? So she goes, yeah, I'm applying. So I was like, okay. So she applied, and then I went home and I applied. I got it. So the executive creative director at BBDO was this guy by the name of David Lubars. And I was working, they had Apple at the time, right? This was before Steve Jobs came back. And I was working on an Apple ad. He comes over one night, it's about 8:30. I'll never forget, I had a Joe Pitka advertising reel on my desk. And he's like, let me see what you're working on. So I showed him what I was working on. And he said to me, he goes, Jason, I said, what's up? He said, look, man, he goes, I feel like I have to tell you this because you're here late and you're a hard worker. He's like, you have an absolute brilliant career in advertising. No doubt in my mind, but not as a copywriter. And David is now the worldwide executive creative chairman or whatever of BBDO today. And he and I had a very funny exchange over this not too long ago. But what ended up happening is about 2 weeks later, Steve Jobs came back, fired BBDO, hired Chiat Day. And I remember the new business development team went into high gear to replace that revenue. And I fell in love with business development, new business, presentations, sales, like all that. And combining that with some creative writing ability and strategy, that really became the thing that I focused on. And I followed the Apple business to Chiat Day. And I got a job at Chiat Day. Now, Chiat Day in the late 1990s will go down, I think, as probably the best advertising agency in the history of advertising. It was that good. It was just filled with geniuses. Again, I had great mentors, Lori Coots, Bob Cooperman, Mike Greenlees, Bill Tragos, Lee Clow, people that I got to see who are all in the Hall of Fame of advertising. But I was just around these people, and, it became just a great foundation in the business. And then the partners that I have at Anomaly, Carl Johnson was the chief exec of Chiat Day, and Johnny Valkin was, the number two. And, we all kind of saw eye to eye. And from that, I started Anomaly when I was 27. So, it was pretty, really had no fucking idea what I was doing, really. But we had a plan, and it worked. I wouldn't have thought that it would have worked to this level, but it did.
What was Anomaly's point of difference? What was the problem because whenever you start a new business, right, you have to be solving a problem. What was the problem you were solving at that time?
Agencies in the marketing communications industry were incredibly siloed. So you were either an advertising agency that did advertising, you were a media company that did media, you were a design agency that did design, you were a retail agency that did retail, et cetera, et cetera. No one talked to each other. So we thought that was pretty stupid. And so we wanted to blow up those silos. The other thing is they were all run, around the brief of design, the brief of advertising, the brief of retail, the brief of digital, the brief. And it was sort of very mechanistic and, sort of assembly line focused. So we said, let's not do that. Let's find out what the actual business issue is of the actual business, and then surround that business issue with world-class talent. We also decided that we were going to create our own intellectual property. So obviously something like Dosis came out of Anomaly. And we thought that timesheets were lies the day they were written. And so why would you ever, create a business centered around a lie? You should center it around the value that you're delivering. And so we invented value-based pricing in the industry. So it was this idea of blowing up the silos, surrounding the business issue with a very diverse and senior group of people, talent. It was doing your own IP, and it was eliminating the lies of timesheets and moving towards value-based compensation, willing buyer, willing seller, and really thinking about what's the ultimate value that one is delivering as opposed to the time or number of people it took to deliver that thing. I'm surprised to this day, no one's copied it.
It's an anomaly.
I don't know why.
It's an anomaly.
Yeah, it's an anomaly. And so that's how we were different. And we were very, very, very good at what we did. And there was no pretense or bullshit. It was actually an agency that worked harder and smarter than everybody else. And it still does.
It's interesting, this person that said to you, you're not a copywriter, and then you kind of took a different path. But what do you think it takes for those listening who are writers, maybe aspiring ad copywriters? What do you think it takes? Like, what did you not, for some reason, have in his eyes that certain copywriters seem to have? I
never asked them the question, so it's hard for me to answer it.
Well, what, in your opinion, what makes a really good ad copywriter?
Someone who can twist insight in a way to just make it a truth that isn't obvious, but incredibly penetrating. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is most of the time. I think they're geniuses at wielding Occam's razor. They just cut through all the unnecessary bullshit, and what's left is the only thing that really matters. But the way that they say that thing somehow matters to you. It's a magic trick. It really is a magic trick. Like, great copy writing, great creativity is a magic trick. I think I am not actually a magician at it. I think I am good enough to fake it. But I recognized in myself that I was faking it. And I agreed with David Lubar's. I agreed with that because I kind of felt it deep down. Like, I saw what the really gifted ones were doing, and I went, yeah, I can't do that. It's like, I know I could work for the rest of my life, and I'm not going to be there.
Yeah. What's an example of a campaign that you just were blown away by that you thought was really magical?
I mean, most of what early Nike had done, I felt was great. And my partner at Anomaly, Mike Byrne, was the exec creative director at Wyden Kennedy on Nike for 7 or 8 years. And so I think what they had done is really good. I think, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and the square holes, the ones that see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote, I'm reciting Think Different. The people who wrote that at Chiat and the people who put that together and casted Dreyfus as a voice and repositioned that company and set the trajectory to arguably the most celebrated and loved brand in human history. That's a magic trick. You can't. That's why I say Chiat was the best agency in the history of agencies. What they did was so incredibly profound and impactful. And it has, no one's done it since. Nobody.
You've worked on some campaigns, though, that are pretty famous, right? Like, I was looking at your bio. You worked on a Budweiser campaign, a bunch of Super Bowl ads for Budweiser. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Like, talk about the process of how you guys came up with those ideas.
I worked on Budweiser for about 11 years, 12 years. Great, big time, iconic American brand. They were bold. They wanted to do amazing things. I think Puppy Love is the most liked Super Bowl ad in history. How did that
puppies
come up?
And horses. Yeah, how did it come up?
It's not fair, but
Yeah, exactly.
The narrative arc of, how I describe that is, look, at that time, I was very aware of the division that was beginning to take place in America.
Yeah.
And if you asked me at that time what I thought the chances of a civil war were in this country, I would have said a coin flip. And so, one of the things about great Super Bowl advertising is you can dip your hand into the torrent of American culture and give rise to something that people want and are feeling, but haven't yet labeled or given voice to. And so those spots, obviously beer is a big thing about camaraderie and, friendship and the sort of the there that's there, if I'm moving into the menschkeit of it all, but the space between a handshake. But that was about how certain relationships just defy reason. And that's okay. And so we wanted to bring that out, right? And so that was what led to that trilogy. It just so happened that I think the division that we were all feeling in this country was released a little bit, that we realized intuitively or explicitly, I don't know, that our similarities are much greater than our differences. Even today, even right now in this environment, that's true. And it was celebrated and people loved it. Now, we also had great directors, great music, great everything.
Yeah.
But you asked the origins of that. That was the origin of that work.
And just so our listeners understand that the basic premise of that was that it is a puppy that it has a relationship with a bunch of Clydesdale horses, like a good, like a wonderful relationship with these Clydesdale horses.
And the Clydesdales protect and care for, and there is a bond between them. And, look, part of it is based on a true story. When you go and you talk to the handlers of the Clydesdales, and you hear the stories of, these dogs that, and the relationships that they have. It wasn't just an invented thing, out of thin air.
Right. So it came out of some research.
Well, real stuff. It's kind of like, write what you know about.
Yep.
It was real.
It wasn't
the stuff that I love it, Anomaly's done so many great campaigns. The Dick's Sporting Goods work that we did for many years is still, in my mind, the best work that.
Tell me a little bit about that. Like, what was that?
That was about celebrating the authentic American amateur athlete. It was about really lifting amateur athletes up to the level of professional superstars, and in a way that was completely and totally real and authentic, yet relatable and inspirational. And that was everything from what goes on in the store to what the Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation did with Sports Matter. It was a 12-year relationship. It's ended now. But, I have, that brand is still that brand, right? They haven't pivoted. It's still that real, authentic American athlete. And it's talking about, sports matter. Sports make a difference. Sports makes people's lives better. You don't have to be a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan or a Phelps or a Williams, to experience that. So that was great. And again, it's very my style and what I believe in and what I believe all great writing is it's got to be real.
Yep. Got to come from a real place. It's got to be authentic. Yes. I try to tell people that a lot. It's so obvious when it isn't coming from an authentic place. But then a lot of people say, well, how do you find, I don't even know if I know what's authentic. I don't know how to find that true voice. And what do you say to them about that? Like, it seems like you've always kind of known who you are, but sometimes people aren't sure who they are, and it's harder for them, I think.
It's like what I do for myself. You spend more time talking to yourself than anybody else.
That voice, it's always talking to you. Yeah.
It's always there. And I have a really good relationship with it, I think. So what I tell people, if they can't find it, is just keep looking.
Yeah.
It's there. It's, it's one of those things where they can go, well, I can't find it. I'm like, well, it's there. It's like, when you leave your keys somewhere and you go, well, I know they're in the house.
Right. You might not like that voice. That voice might be annoying sometimes, but
how wonderful are those characters in literature and movies and in plays that are truly annoying?
because they're not. Yeah,
I mean,
they're
Janice.
imperfect.
Remember Janice and Friends? Like she was
Yeah.
the most annoying character
voice,
ever.
yeah, she had the
Yeah,
annoying
that voice is
right.
But right, annoying. If you're annoying, if you have an annoying voice in your head, that can be brought out in a way that's real and honest and completely and totally entertaining.
One thing I want to ask you, as somebody who's been so successful in the advertising business, I feel like just like everything else, advertising must have changed, advertising has changed a lot, I'm sure, in the last 10 years, right? Like with social media and digital media, how have you had to completely approach it in a different way? Like, I don't even know, like some of the, like the Bud, I mean, I guess that would always be because Super Bowl ads are always Super Bowl ads, but like there's certain things you couldn't do now, right?
Yeah.
How have you had to pivot?
It might have been Scott Galloway who said, you should never be in advertising if you're over 40. And I kind of agree with that.
Interesting.
When we started Anomaly, I was 27. I was running around New York City. I lived in Brooklyn. I had just gotten back from Hong Kong. My friends were hoteliers and directors and, rap artists and street ball players. And like, I just knew, if you asked me then what was going on in American culture, I could tell you what was happening in youth culture. It was like, I was right there. You can study it, you can research it, but unless you're living it and unless you're young, you really have a hard time with it. So advertising, I guess what I'm saying is advertising is a reflection of culture. Culture is in constant change, driven by youth. And therefore you have to be young to really like practice it well. What I do now is I'm more of a Sherpa, I'm more of a coach, and I try and help us, get through some of those things. But Anomaly gets about less than a third of its revenue from advertising. So much more of it is product development and strategy and, more organizational based thinking. I spend all my time now thinking about the future of technology, emerging tech, generative AI, things like that, and how to make the most of those things to make our business and our clients' businesses more competitive. But it's changed. I think it's brought much more emphasis towards product than has ever been before. I think brand has always been rather abstract. I think that my advice to people is great products birth great brands, not the other way around. I believe that businesses should spend more time on their product story, their intrinsics, their supply chains, their customer service, their product market fit, their pricing, than they should on their advertising. I think good advertising today allows for the things that I just said to shine without much of a veil. So that's how I think it's changing. I think product is definitely the thing. And you look at a lot of the biggest brands that we all know and love, they do limited amounts of advertising, right? Like, so you've had $1 trillion businesses that don't do any advertising, really.
Like Amazon
Yeah. Well, Amazon's starting to do more of it, but, I'm thinking like,
Facebook.
Google does it, but
yeah.
Advertising, I think, is just more about really good marketing. And good marketing is about the product, is about the distribution, is about the price, is about the culture of the company, is about who they hire, why they hire them. And I say all the time to people, I think the biggest mistake that the advertising industry ever did to itself is it started pounding on the tables about this idea of brand purpose. What's our purpose? I couldn't say that. I did say this then. I said it internally then. I go, it's bullshit. Brand purpose is bullshit. It's a veneer. It's not meant to be there. Consumers don't actually care. The research that says they do is flawed beyond belief. And what I would say to brands and what I would say to young people in the industry now, purpose is very important. what is your purpose? Like, why is it that you get up in the morning? But I've always thought that the greatest answer to the brand purpose question is to answer the question honestly, why do you make the products that you make? And if you can answer that question as a benefit to the people who actually buy them and consume them, and you have some reverence for their time and money, you're probably going to be a very successful brand.
Good advice. All right, last question I like to ask, and you've had so many mentors and wonderful teachers. What was the best advice you ever got? I guess maybe in terms of, because we're writing podcasts, maybe about writing, and some of it you've echoed, I feel, here in this conversation. But, this teacher, for example, that you had in college at Ithaca, do you remember the best thing he ever told you about that really kind of, that stuck with you in terms of how to be a writer, a creative?
It's a really good question. It's tough because I think about, it's hard to separate out one nugget,
right?
That I feel, does it. We've said it, here. It's actually at the Hemingway thing. It is, all you have to do is write one true sentence. I've always really looked at that as being my guiding post. And then the other one is you have to make it emotionally real to people. That comes from Bruce Springsteen, who I think is a pretty awesome writer in his own right.
I just saw his show. He is quite a genius. Yeah.
There's my office at Anomaly is called Born to Run. But all you have to do is write one true sentence. And if you can make that sentence emotionally real, combining Hemingway and Springsteen, maybe no one's ever done that before. Maybe that's the first time that's ever been done. I doubt it. I'd like to think so, but it's probably not the case. But that to me, write one true sentence and make that sentence emotionally real. And I think you got yourself one hell of a good start.
All right, so that was my interview with Jason last week. Now we are in the future, or I guess in the present. Jason has since given his commencement speech at Ithaca, and he sent me a copy of it last night. So I'm going to include it at the end of this episode. Enjoy all the positivity, and I hope you have a great week. We'll see you next week.
And you have a mighty calling. That calling rings today not as a Pollyannish pat on the back, but rather a resounding challenge for all the world to hear. It is you that will build the businesses, raise the families, create the ideas, and do the work that will define your time. It is you that will solve the problems we humans face today, and believe me, we have a few, and win the opportunities of tomorrow. Everyone, I mean everyone, has a profound interest in what you will do. Like every graduate this spring, bestowed on you are great gifts, great expectations, and therefore great responsibility. You possess the ascending power of youth, energy, and idealism. Don't lose that. And from this institution, you have the means to make something of it. And if that does not excite you, if that does not give you a rising sense of hope in your chest, you might want to pause and reflect. Because graduates, it just doesn't get much better than this. It is your time now. And what a time it is. I am reminded of something that I learned my freshman year here. It's a quote from the naturalist John Muir, actually a passage, written 120 years ago. One learns that the world, though made, is yet being made, that this is still the morning of creation. Graduates, this is your morning of creation. Mornings by their very nature are positive, aren't they? The mere concept of a sunrise promotes a feeling of possibility. It's a chance to do something great. That is the energy of creation. It's positive, it's optimistic, and taken with some determination, and dare I say resilience, anything is possible, simply anything. And as you go about remaking this world on this very morning, I hope you are filled with a sense of enthusiasm, excitement, and energy. As you are young, you no doubt think you have plenty of time. You don't. George Valiceni, our legendary former coach and member of the American Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame, repeatedly told me that my time here at Ithaca was like a backward ticking clock, counting down from 4 years to 0. He warned me that it goes by fast, so make the most of the time you have. Well, Coach, you were right. But whether it's 4 years or 49, it does go by fast. In the sage words played by the character Andy Dufresne, played by Tim Robbins in The Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying.
Thank you for listening to Right About Now, hosted by my dad, Jonathan Small. If you like what you heard, there are a few ways you can help support the show. First, please leave a rating and review wherever you may listen to this podcast. This really helps others find Right About Now. You can also head over to patreon.com/rightaboutnowpodcast to make a donation. Finally, subscribe to the Right About Now newsletter called Small Talk on substack.com. This is Ella, encouraging you all to do the right thing.